Hello, hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Hello, how are you all doing on this fine morning? Hello, I am Phi the Neutrophil. Hello, Casahedron. Hello, welcome to the stream. So, as people are filing in for my special little announcement, I have a question to ask all of you, perhaps one that is a bit overdue. I don't have an art hashtag as of the moment, and I know that there have been people trying to send me fan art. I guess I never really considered the fact that people would want to draw fan art of I'm but a blue ball, but I figured, yeah, as people are filing in, if you have thoughts as to which hashtag we should use, I would love to hear them. So the ones that I have in mind are hashtag microbial masterpieces, which seems somehow to be mostly unused, Phi art, and I know that combining the terms Phi and art into one tag can lead to some interesting pronunciations, and then neutrophil art. Because Phi art and phylum art both appear to be used, which is, a little sad for me. But yeah, I'll go ahead and put up a poll to see if people have any. Yeah, exactly, Hazars. That's exactly what I mean. But I don't mind. I'll go ahead and start a poll, and if you have something else that's clever, I would love to hear that as well. How have your days been going? I'm curious. My day has been alright. It's pretty early in the morning for me. But now that I'm off work, it's been pretty chill. I've had a lot of time to just work on other things, which has been good. Microbial masterpieces. And the next option is Phi art. Whoop. Don't know what I did there. Yeah. So how is everybody in chat? I want to know if you're still in school. I guess it would be undergraduate, because if you're not in undergraduate, you probably aren't awake to watch this, at least if you're in the US. And if you are, you should go back and pay attention to your classes. Welcome, Hurricane. Do macrophages attack parasites? It's an interesting question. I don't know if that is the primary function of the macrophage, because there are other immune system cells who are dedicated to doing that sort of thing. Hello, Brina, welcome. Just doing a bit of light studying. My brain can't handle not being in classes for the semester anymore. Interesting. Yeah, I get this feeling, especially right when the semester ends, that right when I no longer have adult work responsibilities, I can't even find myself enjoying playing video games or totally vegging out, because to me, procrastination is the ultimate spice, right? Nothing feels better in terms of gaming when you are gaming when you're supposed to be doing something else. When you have nothing to do, truly nothing, I find that it doesn't hit quite the same, which is pretty interesting. I kind of miss the structures classes would bring. Welcome, Cider, welcome to the stream. Yeah. I missed having to see my friends IRL. I don't really know if I would count that as a structure of classes, because sometimes those could be hard to attend, especially when you are the type to wake up a bit later than everybody else. But at least a way to force myself to see people was nice. Definitely nice. So it looks like Microbial Masterpiece is the one that we'll go with. That sounds pretty good to me. Yeah, so if you find the urge to contribute some art to this channel, that would be fantastic and very well appreciated. Okay, so let's get into why you probably clicked on this stream. It's this mystery that I have placed upon you, that I've been teasing a bit over the past couple of weeks, and now it is time to get into what the heck this even is. So I guess before I give away the answer, I'm kind of curious as to what your guesses are, although some of you in chat may have a pretty good idea as to what's coming up. I think the thing is gaming becomes more of a thing you just do normally rather than escape from everything. Yeah, exactly. Like the taste of gaming escape, I think, is unparalleled. I'd give anything to sit in my prep area in our university microlab and watch the autoclave heat up right now. Yeah, it's fascinating. Autoclaves gives me such anxiety. Because essentially what they are little pressure cookers, little pressure bombs, and there are so many rules by which you have to abide to ensure that nobody gets hurt. After a while, you kind of get used to it, and then it stops being so scary. But the autoclave at my current institution looks like one of those containers that you load torpedoes into. Like, it's very old school, has like a stainless steel wheel crank, whereas in my previous institution we had a very fancy touchscreen automated kind of machine that made everything feel a bit safer. But yeah, loading things into that kind of torpedo shell, very very scary the first couple times. Although I think in terms of things that I feared in the lab the most, autoclave is definitely up there, but what's even scarier is compressed gas, just tanks of oxygen, just missiles waiting to be launched. Yeah, all right. So, what the heck have I put upon you on this screen? What is this? What the heck is this? It is something that we have been working on behind the scenes for a couple of months, more than maybe half a year at this point since the idea originally started. This is a new VTuber group. So yes, this is V Theorem. This is what we came up with. This is the project that we have been diligently working on for the past couple of months. I think we started this idea in, I think, December, maybe. This idea for a not an agency, but a VTuber group. We. Let me get right into that. So, we've been cooking this up for like half a year, and who is we? I teased them a little bit in these darkened eye banners, which, by the way, you can find the artist down in the description. And now it's finally time to see who we actually are. So here are the eye banners. And they're lit up. These are two of my VTubing comrades here. The top being Cider A and the bottom being Nepenthes VT. You can find them both on Twitch and in the description below. And yes, as you have correctly predicted, Hussars, these are channels that are going to be doing science content in a VTubing format, which I am super excited with. I've collaborated with both of them previously on my channel, so if you don't know anything about them, that might be a good place to get introduced to them. But let me talk to you a little bit more about who they are. So V Theorem is a group of STEM education VTubers consisting of me, Phi the Neutrophil. I do cell and molecular biology, although hopefully you already know that, seeing as you are on my channel. Then we have Cider A, who is a psychologist, and I think was just in chat. I don't know if you're still here, but if you are, please say hello. Not only does she do psychology, she also does something called metascience, so the science of science, which is really, really fascinating. She's in the midst of her thesis writing hell at the moment, but she does do journal club streams where she'll read a paper on stream, which is a format that I've been thinking about doing, but I'm not brave enough to do that live. Hello, Sai. Hello. Hey, everybody say hello to Cider. Go check her out on Twitch. She also has VODs on YouTube too, so if you prefer that format, you can go right ahead and take a look at that. But yeah, she does these really interesting journal club streams where she'll read and interpret a paper for you live, which is similar but different to what I do, right? Except the difference is, she's good enough at psychology to not need to constantly be Googling things. I've been I've been toying with the idea of doing something similar, but when I started planning to read papers live on stream, because there's an interesting utility about that, right? Like both of us share a similar mission of making science accessible to a lay audience, real like high level stuff, not just the stuff that you would find on pop science channels, which have their own purpose, right? Like I don't want to, denigrate any other science content creator for what they do. But what I found is that there's a distinct lack of not trying. There's a lack of, I think, notable attempts, maybe is the correct term. I don't know that, but that also sounds offensive. But the point being is that there aren't that many big channels devoted to explaining science through the eyes of scientists that hasn't been trimmed down too much for a lay audience. Not to say that those venues are bad, but it's just the things about biology to me that are exciting are different than what ends up being made for a wide audience. Hello, Megacraft. Hello, welcome. And so I would highly recommend you check her channel out. She's also just a very fun and entertaining streamer in general. And then the other comrade that I have is Nepenthes VT, who is a carnivorous plant VTuber. You can find her on Twitch as well. And her specialties are horticulture and entomology. So like I do a lot of cell and molecular stuff because to me, that's like the world that I find the most fascinating. But biology is so vast and varied that I couldn't do anything about like if you get higher than like a mouse in terms of complexity, my ability to break things down just disappears. I know nothing about the wide and vast worlds of like plants, especially plants. Fungi I know a little bit about, but plants to me are so foreign. And so it's really great to see that Nep is so willing to share sort of her knowledge, not just in like the biology of plants, but also how to take care of them, which I think is fascinating. She's also been dipping her toes in entomology. So if you like bugs, you might want to tune into her stream in the future. It's very, very interesting. Is she a Venus flytrap? I'm pretty sure she is. I think Nepenthes is the I want to say genus of this particular carnivorous carnivorous plant. Yeah. So in terms of conceptualizing what this group is, we're not an agency, so we don't have any managers. We are run by ourselves, so you can imagine how interesting that experience is. In this, I just made it sound shady. It's interesting in the sense that, like, agencies have managers and stuff, and people whose job it is to determine the direction of a certain group, whereas we are like pretty scrappy in that regard. It's just the three of us right now. And so we've spent this like half year cooking up exactly what we imagine this thing to be. And there'll be more details revealed on Sunday when we actually debut. But to give you a little idea of what we're thinking about, is we're thinking about this group that you can imagine as sort of a campus for VTubers who have all sorts of cool things to share. So, there's kind of a somewhat disparaging joke, I guess, or lamentation that like VTubers like mostly game, and that's true. But because gaming is it's just fun. It's nothing wrong with gaming, right? As content creation. But I think that providing a space and a way to discover VTubers who do things that aren't gaming is valuable, right? Because there are actually a lot of people out there, a lot of VTubers out there with highly specialized knowledge who have the desire to share that knowledge with their audience, but it's kind of hard to find them, I think, sometimes, because there isn't that kind of outward organization. So if you want to imagine this group, we're thinking of, it's just the three of us now, and we intend to keep it that way for quite a bit, because we're still working out what it means to actually be a group. But if you can imagine a future where education becomes a regular and sizable niche within VTubing, that would be just kind of incredible. Yeah. So, oh, pitcher plant. I knew that. See, this is how unaware I am of plant biology, which is why it's so great to have, because even two biologists will most likely have extremely different backgrounds. It's been fascinating to talk to people in this space to see what they've learned. Yeah. So we debut 5/19 Sunday at 3 p.m. EST. There'll be a V theorem lore drop. Yes, we do have lore, a little bit more lore than the lore that I tease in my video. But for this debut to be accessed, we kind of need your help. So in the pinned comment, there is a Google form where you can submit questions for us. So not only the talents ourselves, so me, Sai, and Net, but also maybe our disciplines if you have specific questions about cell molecular biology, psychology, or horticulture, as well as anything you kind of want to know about V-theorem as an idea. I got 50% of my knowledge in high school from YouTube. Although yes, there is a lack of this type of content. Yeah, exactly. Like don't get me wrong. There are lots of great educational channels out there, especially channels that will help you in school. For me, that's not exactly the content that I want to do, just because I find that, like, if you're a biologist, you know who Shomu's biology is. You know Khan Academy, you know SciShow, and I could not do a better job doing those things than they do, right? And if you want undergraduate level stuff, then you can find full lectures online from really great universities who just have that material out there that you can learn from. What I want to do is occupy a space in which you can engage with science sort of informally, right? Because if you're watching Shomu's biology, you're usually, I want to say, not watching it for fun. Usually it's because you have a quiz or a test, and I watch Show Me's biology all the time to refresh on stuff that I need to learn to be able to teach properly. So those are great resources. But what I want to do is occupy a space where, because streams allow you to interact with us, a place where you can informally and leisurely interact with science, very high level science. So a place where you can engage and remain in contact with some of the stuff that is happening at the brinks of education and science. Yeah. It feels like I end up hearing the same few basic facts over and over again when there's an entire sea of information they're out there to use. I really enjoyed John Green's mini documentary on TB. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I applied to work on that and then I got rejected. But I trust them to do good work in that regard because SciShow is such a great and regular part of the education sphere. But it shows you that there's a hunger, I think, for deeper content that is more than just fun facts. That's also really disparaging. Fun facts can get you into the door, right? And then once you're in the door, like, I want to occupy the space where I can show you the stuff that makes me really, really excited. So not only are we going to do a Q&A for our debut, but we're also going to do a little science trivia for fun. So we're going to challenge each other about knowledge in our respective fields. So I'll be asking Sai and Nep some biology questions. Sai will be asking us some psychology questions. Nep will be asking us some questions about plants and stuff. Since those are the disciplines that we're most familiar with, and we're gonna do them like easy, medium, hard. But I want to do like a bonus lightning round of trivia that is from the audience. So if you have any fun trivia questions, it doesn't have to be from our disciplines. In fact, I would prefer if it were outside of our disciplines. So if you're a physicist or a computer science person and you want to really watch us squirm, please use that link in the pinned comment to submit some questions there. Yeah. So more details and more hypothesizing about what we actually are will happen on Sunday. Okay. So that's sort of all I had for the announcement. Now I want to do a little bit of chatting because I've been so classes for me has just ended last week, and you know, we're finishing up grading this week. Fun facts got me into the door of studying infectious disease. Now I want more. Yeah, exactly. Like that's kind of what I aspire to provide for people, is that the really, really cool stuff is that it's such a high level that you don't really, it's not really appropriate for a 101. We all have our place in that kind of pipeline. In terms of, I see some chatter about the immune system in the stomach. I actually have a video that is coming out after the Prion video about that very topic, so stay tuned for that. So education has been on my mind, and I want to ask chat what your experience in academia, not even academia, just school in general is. Did you associate school with positive feelings, memories, negative feelings, memories, neutral? Kind of want to know, kind of want to pull, like my audience, I assume, because you have tuned into me, that school might not have been the worst thing for you. I assume, perhaps erroneously, that you are all pro school, although it is a pretty wide-reaching assumption, considering I myself have had experiences in school that were maybe less positive. In the sense where, like, I love learning, as you can probably tell, I love teaching, but in terms of my lived experience in school as someone who was pre-medicine and then later dropped pre-medicine, that kind of track was pretty tough. And so education has been on my mind because, well, the semester's just ended, and you know, at the university that I teach at, we care a lot about student education. I think far more than anyone has cared about my education. And so there have been a couple of issues that have been swimming around in my brain. School is pretty good to me, but I hated college. Hello, Joshua. Welcome, welcome. Can you tell me what you hated about college? Because this is kind of getting in the area of what I want to think about. This has nothing to do with biology, of course. But as a instructor, it is my job to be aware and to be thinking about the experience of students, not only in the classroom, but sort of around their lives as well. Which is why I think it's interesting to farm out responses from chat who don't go to my university to see whether or not some elements are more universal in nature or whether or not some things are local to our university. Yeah, I'll speak a little more about my particular experience with education. I had been like in an environment where I was expected to be a medical doctor, as many people with my background typically are, because, you know, life of a medical doctor is stable and well-paying, and every well-meaning, not every well-meaning, but many well-meaning parents who want the best for their children may push them to exceed academically so that they can land one of these hyper-stable jobs with a lot of pay. But I had found that that kind of expectation attached to a number and performance kind of made school very, very, very stressful, which I thought kind of sucked. High school was fun, but I hated some subjects. I like university more since it's more about the things I like. Yeah, I felt that way too when I got to university, that I said, okay, I'm finally going to be able to study the things that I want to study and ignore all the things that I don't, which didn't end up really being that true when I got there. Yes, I was studying more biology, but to get the degree, I still had to do physics and chemistry, and those stressed me out a lot. Lower grades were rough because I was in special education. College was hard because I could handle the academics. I didn't have the life skills. I love learning, but not always formal academia. Yeah, the environment of academia, like even as someone who is still in academia, I found that the environment to be very rough. And so I want to get into a little more about what we can do about that for that kind of thing. I honestly didn't hate anything about school except the brief taste I got from academia TM at the end of my degree. Working a month on an essay and being told it kind of sucks is devastating. Yeah, Megacraft. So this is kind of the situation that some of my students are in. I want to explore that as I talk about that experience from my side. Yeah. it wasn't really the fault of the institution. It was just kind of culture shock. I got pretty good grades, but I coasted by in primary and secondary school. Uh, yeah, that happens to a lot of people who are pretty good at doing school up until university, where the escalation of difficulty is just crazy. The concepts I was being taught fully, I didn't mind the extra work, but I feel like that was just me. Yeah. I mean, I expect there to be some variability in academic experience. I still am planning on going to grad school because I am in AI and I have more to learn. Yeah, AI is a huge field that's coming out right now, and so if that's what you're interested in, that's definitely worth getting more training in that field. It's just me, or do not a lot of people in high school not know basic grammar or how to spell? If you're in America, that's always been kind of the case. Yeah, college is really, really different. Uh, okay, so we're like in the right mentality, I think, to start talking about some of the more specific stuff. But just to finish, uh, I did medicine thinking that I was finally returning to civil math. Yeah, I mean, that's actually what I'm just about to talk about. Since I was pre-med, um, I was not allowed to enjoy classes because there's always this like number that's hanging above my head, and I just wanted to learn, which is why like when my advisor talked to me and convinced me to not be a doctor, I felt so much more liberated because I no longer had to care about the number. I could just learn for fun, and actually learning for fun put me in so much more of a better mental headspace that I actually ended up doing better anyway. The fear and anxiety surrounding grades caused me to procrastinate, and procrastinating as a response to anxiety, was not good for my grade. And so the lived lives of students, I care deeply about them, and I want to help sort of give them the environment that I could not manage for myself, or at least understand what could be done, even if it's not possible for me to do anything about it. Imagine learning, true. Yeah, my university's biochem department quite small, so it kind of sucks because we don't have the resources for independent research or super specific discipline classes. Yeah, that's the kind of reward that you get for going to a big R1 research university as opposed to maybe a smaller liberal arts school for the sciences. That's not to say that small liberal arts schools aren't good for science, or that not all of them are, but in today's education sphere, having a bit of that kind of experience can often be quite helpful. Yeah, but having personal relationships with professors is quite awesome. I mean, that's mostly why you go to university. Okay, so I've been thinking about these specific issues. I'm actually going to add a fourth one here because I just came up with it. The value of positive reinforcement. Okay. So the first topic that I want to talk about, chat, and farm you out. Well, actually, I think Merkala has something interesting to say. Uh, this maybe just be a recovering gifted kid thing, but having to go to professors for help was hard. I feel like a failure because I didn't learn the topic the first time. That's something you can help with. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because in terms of the gifted kid syndrome, I had a little bit of that. A little bit, but not like gifted kid. I always thought that I was capable. I hesitate to say smart because it's kind of messed up. But from when I was like, when I was like 8, I don't know. I've been on a treadmill of like gifted academic systems. Like from when I was very young, I was already very competitive. Put in already like very competitive learning environments. So there's two sides of the coin, right? Like I was never made to feel gifted because I knew how tall the mountains were, right? There were people that I grew up with that were so effortlessly brilliant that I was never made to feel better than them. But because everybody in my classes were like that, I consciously knew that meant that I was also pretty good. But emotionally I was never meant to feel like I was that good, which was kind of a bummer. So it's kind of a different perspective, but it both wraps around to this idea of self-worth. I advocate students to get help all the time. We remind students that we have office hours quite regularly. Although I wonder what we could say to help them come more often, because apparently from my coworkers, students used to go to office hours much more frequently, and now they don't do that quite as much anymore, which is kind of interesting. I learned that pre-med was not the only way I had to go. I felt like the entire world was lifted off my shoulders. I had no idea about research. Exactly, that was me too. Um, so the first thing, maybe let's jump topics. So to go off of Mercala's comment, maybe let's talk about the homework later. Let's talk about critical self-assessment instead. So when you were in university, how should I word this as a question for chat? How well do you think you matched your expectations for how you did in university? So what I mean by that is we all have egos. Some are bigger than others. My ego is quite big, I think. And then university often, as you've all correctly identified in chat, really like slaps that ego around quite a bit. Although since I've had my ego slapped around from a very young age, I actually didn't feel like university was that much harder. Again, never meant to feel like I was gifted. So that challenge to me was just expected. What I find on my side now that I'm no longer a student but am an instructor, that there's this skill that I'm tentatively calling critical self-assessment that I think that I've not seen as much of. So basically knowing what your limits are and predicting how well you will do in a certain set of circumstances. So I want to hear from chat if I know that a couple of you have mentioned being surprised at how hard things were, but how long did it take for you to adjust, if you did, or were you just like slapped around by that dissonance the entire time? Because I feel like because I was pre-med, I had to min-max my classes for a high GPA, right? That's just reality. If you want to go to medical school, you need a ridiculously high grade. 3.75 out of 4 is the recommended GPA, which means for every like 3 A's, you're like allowed 1 B or something like that. I don't really know how the math shakes off, but like that idea of performing at that level of perfection meant that I had to come up with a strategy to achieve that level of rigor, right? Adjusted very well to having way more work. I kind of want to know how that happened, or what qualities might you say allowed you to adjust to having more work. I didn't have that at all. I mostly hit my A grades, but I wrecked my body and mind in the process. I still have issues accepting my limits. Yeah. I felt that way too before I gave up being pre-med. Is I was not sleeping. I actually developed intermittent insomnia. Like nowadays, I still have trouble sleeping occasionally, but I would say that the number of nights that I didn't get any sleep nowadays is 0. Like not being in school and being that stressed out means that I can just sleep normally, and that's really nice. Yeah, but in university, pretty much all 4 of my years, every month I would have a couple days where I would lie sleepless in bed, and that was like devastating. I adjusted to having work because my brain be like that. I mean, I suppose that there are some people who can certainly pull that off, but I'm more wondering what I can do for the students who have trouble adjusting. I used to be terrified to go to ask for help and to go to office hours, even during my K through 12 education. It was hard to ask for help. Being a perfectionist held me back from my fullest potential, I feel like. Yeah, that to me is interesting. Because okay, so maybe this is the solution, right? Maybe it's that I should communicate that my best students come to office hours. maybe, I don't know, chat, I don't know if that would have helped if at the beginning of class, a new class, a challenging class, because the class that I teach is quite challenging, if I just up and said, like, historically, the students who come to office hours end up outperforming those who do not. Um, and I wonder if that would shake something in you, because I'm not making a judgment, because it's not possible to know, like, oh, students who are okay with coming to office hours tend to outperform others because they have a more open-minded attitude towards their academics. That's certainly possible. Or the office hours themselves are actually helping them improve their grade. Whatever the case may be, as agnostic as I want to be, if I said that coming to office hours has historically had students outperform their competitors, I mean, that kind of feeds into this whole depressing thing about competition, but I wonder if that's enough to shake students out of their perfectionism. For my Moroccan, the problem wasn't grades in high school, but the acceptance exam. Preparing for that after high school burned me out. Yeah. I mean, I went to schools that required entrance exams, and those were, I referred to them as the Hunger Games because those were the best schools where we lived, the ones that required entrance exams, but they were also free. And so if you are a kid trying to like make it in the world, and you don't have the massive economic advantage of having very wealthy parents, getting into one of these test entrance schools was like your ticket to a better future. It was both very hopeful and very stressful at the same time. Me, a shitty student throughout life, sipping my tea in the corner reading this. There's gonna be some tea. I can't be too specific because, you know, what if I'm doxxed, right? But there's some angst from an instructor's point of view that I have. Give students less work. We don't like it. So that's kind of what I'm going to get into when I talk about homework and the utility of homework. That would make a big difference. I'm guessing, like, saying that office hours has historically helped. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I'll keep that in mind. The only reason I managed that was because a lot of my friends were really good students. That helped a lot. Yeah, having a positive environment where achievement is a culturally desirable feature, I think, is helpful. Maybe not sufficient, but helpful. I felt like it was a burden on the professor for needing help, even though that was literally their job. Yeah. I could also say that I love talking to students during office hours. So the specifics of my class is to help them. It's a laboratory class with a heavy communication component, so they start to write scientifically, which to me is a big milestone when it comes to learning science. Because it's one thing to be good at learning individual facts about science and being tested on those facts, which is important because you need to know your science to do your science. But in terms of thinking, like, I've said it on stream before, but I've had people tell me that I'm quite eloquent, and I take that in stride. I'm quite proud of my ability to communicate. But that ability only comes from getting corrected on your writing, actually, because writing forces you to put a lot of thought into how your words come across. And I love helping students refine their writing, because once they refine their writing, their thinking becomes a lot clearer too. It's kind of a feedback system where the better you write, the better you think. The better you think, the better you write. And watching, like, reading their, let's be honest, bad writing at the beginning of the semester, and then watching that improvement over the semester, and also getting to see that their brains are switching from students that are learning facts to students that are coming up with ideas has been incredible. Such fun. A comment like that from my toxicology professor is what really helped me. I was shy at first, but at the end of the semester, I was able to ask what felt like stupid questions all the time. Yeah, because we're all incredibly passionate about what we teach. It's, you know, it's our whole lives, basically. It's hard to separate your research from your life in general. And the fact that I get to continue doing that is such an awesome thing. I went to office hours religiously for one professor because it was known that he gave hints to the next exam by going over relevant problems. See, that wouldn't actually work with me because we don't have exams. We're purely a laboratory class. But students that do come to my office hours, if they show me their writing and ask pointed questions about what can be improved, I help them. Like it's, I want everybody to get an A. I do. I really would prefer to give everybody an A, but it's not always reflective, and I don't want to lower my standards, especially because the institution that I teach at, the standards are higher than they were for me when I was in their shoes. So in a way, I do feel sympathy for my students, because at the same age, they're way smarter than me, way better than me, not even close. But at the same time, like, because I teach at this institution, we all expect them to be really, really good. And we will do anything to help them get there as long as they're willing to put in their half. Okay, so here's a bit of tea. And I'm going to try to keep it very vague. Again, doxable. But since like student feedback is anonymous-ish to begin with, it's like not a big deal. But what I'll say, and I'll see if chat, if you kind of agree with this sentiment, should grades be reflective of the effort that students put into a class? And I'll ask that again. Should grades be reflective of the amount of effort that students put in? And I'll let you ponder that question as I catch up on chat. I always felt too anxious to ask professors questions because I believed they would think I didn't pay attention or get annoyed. That's categorically untrue unless it's something about the rubric. I don't know. When I get asked questions about the rubric, I'm like, I gave you a copy. It's available online. Like, those kinds of things, which are just like how the class functions, just look at the rubric. Like, that's stuff that kind of annoys me. But otherwise, clarifications about the actual science, or if something didn't register the first time it was heard, I do take that as an indication that I did not properly communicate it or could have done better myself. A lot of professors aren't definitely like you. At least where I study public education, you can really feel when professors don't want to spend time solving your questions, much less talking with you. That's true. I'm very, very blessed to be in a position where my whole... So here's the thing. Megacraft, that's a great point, and it's why there needs to be more people who do my job. So I teach, that's 100% of my job, because I mean, I definitely had professors like this too in university, where it felt like teaching was a chore and it wasn't very helpful. But there's now a bit more interest in hiring people with high education to only teach so that the professors can do what they actually want to do, and then the students don't have to get a compromised education. However, that idea doesn't always yield happy people, which I think is stupid. Like, if you have high education, if you know your stuff, you should be able to teach no problem. But as I recently learned, some students may not have the highest opinion of learning from instructors that are not tenured professors, which is dumb. Professors are professors because the research that they do is important. That doesn't necessarily qualify them to teach. That doesn't necessarily mean that the knowledge transfer is going to be good. Because what I view my role as an instructor differently than the role of a professor. My job is to teach you the 101. My job is to teach you how to think in very clear terms. I equate myself to like an art teacher, right? Your first high school art teacher, you know, maybe you've been doodling your entire life, but the first time you sit down and take an art class, your teacher has to teach you about perspective. Your teacher has to teach you about color theory, shading, you know, basic stuff like that before you can do things like Michelangelo, right? Your professors can teach you about Michelangelo. They can teach you to be the best of the best. What I'm doing is I am equipping you to learn from those professors. But I think that more universities should be hiring full-time instructors with benefits to take the teaching job away from professors who don't want to teach. Because, yeah, you can say, oh, I learned from this Nobel Prize winner. That's cool. But if they're not good at teaching and they don't want to teach, then it hurts the students and it wastes the professor's time. That's my spiel on that. No, it should be one's understanding, because some people don't put in effort, something they already reached or is easy to reach. Yeah, so that's the other side of the coin, is that there are students who work really hard or who don't work very hard at all and then excel. and you would punish them if they did not do, if they weren't like putting in effort, because there's no way to measure effort, right? Not objectively, at least. I don't really have an answer. I think there should be an understanding if someone is trying really hard but isn't doing well anyway, but you also do want to give them A's. You don't want to give them A's if they're not competent. Exactly. I've had feedback suggesting that it felt unfair that grades were not reflective of the amount of effort that was put into the class. And I get that, because the class that I teach is hard, and effort is nice, I think, but effort doesn't save lives, for example, right? Like, if you're a doctor and you have a patient's lives in your hand and you are wrong, that could be devastating for a patient, even if you worked hard to get there. At the end of the day, what the grade is reflective of, from my perspective, is not the amount of effort that was put in, but how have you actually, like, understood the material, right? Like, it's an A is an endorsement that you know and have been equipped with the stuff that I've been able to provide for you. And I think what's difficult about this is I don't sympathize in a sort of way. It's difficult because when I was an undergraduate, you know, back in my day, there were classes that I took that I put in a ton of hours into and didn't perform well in. Like organic chemistry lab 2, that was my only C in undergrad. But I never thought for a second that I deserved a better grade. Like, the thought never even occurred to me. I just accepted that I was bad at organic chemistry. And I find that the sentiment of my effort does not reflect my grade is becoming more common, which I think is troubling. I don't really get it. We're very happy to help students get the grade that they want to grade, but it's not, the work doesn't necessarily happen on our side. At least that's my stance. I would love for the students who put in a lot of effort to get high grades. Like, it actually kills me to like deduct points, I want to say. Like, some of my favorite students are ones that I see are putting in the hours, but at the same time, the learning is not being reflected in the quality of their work. And I think it's difficult because, yeah, like, exams are not reflective of the real world environment that you would be working in, right? So one could argue that test taking is not reflective of actual performance, and therefore is not a great metric by which we judge students. That's fine. I don't have a strong opinion on testing because my class doesn't test, right? We teach writing and lab skills, and those things are very reflective of real world application, right? You will write grant proposals, you will do journal clubs, you will write research papers. That's a one-to-one application between our class and the real world. And writing is difficult. It's not easy. Over grad school, I've just been destroyed by my professor repeatedly on my writing, right? I would hand in a 3-page grant proposal and she would hand back an 8-page grant proposal. Those additional 5 pages would be her comments on how bad my writing was. And I sympathize because having that much negative feedback can hurt. Like, it would really be depressing to learn that you suck at writing. As it did me. Like, I was an English minor. Like, I went into grad school thinking, oh, I'm going to be great at writing. And those first couple times when I got those 8 pages of detailed feedback telling me every line how wrong I was or how bad I am at writing, that that was discouraging. It gave me anxiety. It made me not want to look at those documents, and it made me procrastinate implementing that level of feedback. I get it. I sympathize because I do the same thing to my students, and I know at an emotional level how bad that can feel. But at the same time, writing is a kind of skill, right? It's like painting, right? Like you don't get an A if you don't know how to do the basics of painting. Even if you feel like you worked really hard on your painting, like it's a skill that you have to build, and there is an effectiveness to the art of writing. And if your writing is not effective, if I am confused while reading your writing, if I have to reread your writing a whole lot, if you are missing important pieces of information that would be required to understand your science, I just can't justify giving an A. It would be unfair for the students who did earn that A. Does that make sense? Maybe rounding if they're on the line between grades, but boosting them too much isn't fair. Yeah, exactly, because there are students that I have that are definite A's, have put in the work, and have implemented the feedback. And now, like, I remember this feeling of reading one of the final homeworks and feeling quite emotional, as I do every year, because there's so much of the semester where I read the homeworks and I have to reread each homework like 5 or 6 times, and then just a mountain of red ink correcting everything. And that final homework was so good, so clear, and I feel like I've actually done my job by then. And that level of improvement, I think, is validating not only for the student but for me as well. The difference between my final microbiology lecture and lab grade was and anatomy 1 grade was very eye-opening in showing me what my brain really wanted to learn. Yeah, same. I got a B in physiology, which, you know, is fine for a researcher, but physiology, learning everything about the human body, boy, was that difficult. And it showed me, and it was one of the pieces of evidence that I had that I was maybe not fit to be a medical doctor. Sometimes the test in itself is unfair. Spent hours studying for philosophy and even cheated, barely passed. Yeah, I can't speak for every institution out there. I can only trust that my colleagues have classes that are fair as well. I know that the stuff in my class, I feel very confident because there are quite a number of us whose full-time job is to just perfect this class. Yeah, so critical self-assessment I'm defining as an awareness of one's own limitations, because another problem that we've had is, you know, we have an overabundance of overachievers, which I'm not surprised by. I grew up in a highly overachieving environment, and, you know, people always wanting to do more, but like weirdly enough, I never felt that way when I was an undergraduate, right? So even though I was also pre-med, as with a lot of my other colleagues, I never felt like I was doing too much, because there would be students in my cohort that would take like 8 classes or whatever and fully load their schedule, never have time for fun, but they like kicked ass. Like they were machines of learning, right? They did not eat, sleep, or drink their entire 4 years of undergrad. But for me, even though I was their competition, I knew that I had limits, and I limited myself. I pushed myself harder in a certain semester than others, but I never took more than I could handle, because I knew strategically that I needed a high grade. In my experience at the institution that I work for, a lot of students are taking more and more classes, just piling on, overloading themselves, pushing themselves to the utmost limit. And when their grades falter, sometimes we get the brunt of that critique, that we are making classes too hard, that we are giving too much work. When in reality, no one is asking them to take that many classes. You don't need to take that many classes. I don't know if there are members in chat right now who felt similarly during their university experience, felt compelled to push themselves beyond their limit. But for me, the skill of like critical self-assessment was really worthwhile because it helped me keep my grades up and my stress lower than what it could have been, right? Watching out for your own mental health and understanding your own limitations. I don't know how you teach that, right? Because we're getting more and more students who are seeing the state of the economy and are not happy and are trying to be the best because they feel like if they're not literally the best, then they might not go anywhere, which is just so untrue. I had a class called Intro to Biological Literature where we learned how to find, analyze, and write papers. We had to do so many peer reviews, but the professor never based your grade on the reviews. Interesting. I don't really know if a paper reading class would really fit into our particular curriculum because it's kind of baked into our existing classes. That kind of thing reaches to like the end point of science to begin with, where if you're critiquing papers, you know, we're getting into things that are not verifiable, like what counts as a good thought versus a bad thought, as long as both thoughts are testable and can yield results, right? Like that becomes a lot harder to grade. I mean, it could be interesting to have a class like that pass fail, maybe in the first year or something. That could be cool. Because some students just didn't put in the work. I dissect paragraphs and find things to compliment or suggest in every paper. Some students would give absolutely no feedback. Yeah, complimenting students I think is also tricky, which maybe we'll transition to. The problem is when I got my gifted child syndrome, I was never punished. I always wanted to see how much less time I can spend studying while getting good grades. Yeah, that can definitely hit, especially at an institution like this where everybody has gifted kid syndrome at some point. But I just wish that like there shouldn't be shame associated with taking a lighter course load, as long as you can do that course load to the utmost of your ability, right? Like it's better to learn 100% of one class than it is to learn 50% of two classes, is essentially my feeling. And because I feel like students don't really have a good understanding of what it means to be competitive. Like, that's why I have the term, close out of the PowerPoint. That's why I have the term critical in the title, because it's not a one-way ticket. Just because you take 8,000 classes does not guarantee that a company will take you. What a company wants, or a grad school wants, is someone who is capable of doing work, capable of thinking critically, capable of being an effective scientist. And I just feel like if you are out here and you're grinding all the classes in the universe because you think that will help you, it might be like an ego, like an insecurity kind of thing, right? Because maybe they don't know that to really be, I think, from my perspective at least, I don't work for a company, but my impression is that it's better to have a student who actually understands 5 things than a student who approximately understands 10 things. And so, like, by critical self-assessment, I mean critically looking at yourself as a candidate for a graduate school or a company and thinking about what makes you as a potential candidate attractive. Like for me, I applied to a graduate school that valued teaching because I had been teaching ever since I was like in middle school. And it turns out that I never wanted to do research to begin with. I really, really want to teach instead. Not that I don't want to do research. It's more like I have more fun teaching than I have fun doing research. And so I understood, I had a self-awareness that that was my biggest strength, that my ability to communicate and to teach was going to make me more competitive in the stuff that I want to be competitive in. Whereas I think when you don't have that clear understanding of yourself, like, oh, I just want to be the best biologist in the world, that means I'm going to take every biology class and try to do well in all of them. That's not as valuable as someone who is really, really passionate about 1 or 2 different fields and wants to know everything in that field, but is okay leaving other things out, or even leaving things out in that specific field because there's this kind of implicit trust that you'll learn that kind of stuff again, right? Like, if you are graduating, it doesn't mean that your learning ends. It means that you know, I don't know that anybody says, I wish I took more classes during undergraduate. I mean, maybe that's true. At least in my experience, that's typically not true because undergraduate gives you your foundation. Um, and then a part of being an adult is learning how to learn, like the process of being an adult in undergrad, like part of not just like learning in classes, but also like figuring out how to learn and how to teach yourself. Your learning doesn't end just because you graduate from undergraduate. On the job, you will be doing learning. In grad school, you'll be doing more learning, right? Like you don't have to cram everything. And I find that that's hard to convey to a population that is so competitive. Yeah, for med school, it's a completely different question, Brina, and I think to them, I'm a lot more understanding of like, okay, I know you're trying to be super competitive, but you need to look out for your grade. Um, you don't have to take every hard course in existence. The most important thing for medical school, at least in the US, is high GPA and good MCAT and good extracurriculars. Like deep learning in deep courses, I don't think is valued quite as highly. So yeah, I wish, because if I say that kind of stuff, I don't even think that they would believe me, right? If I said, hey, it's actually better to learn less and do well and distinguish yourself from your classmates by maintaining a high GPA and specialized knowledge or uh, wide knowledge, right? You can go wide, you can go deep. You could argue that going deep in this economy is maybe better, at least for employment, but I can't really make a claim there personally. But I just know, like, what I do know is that if you bomb and you want a competitive academic minded job, that's not as good. I know that like people say college doesn't matter and your grades don't matter. They do depending on what you want to do, right? Like it's you can't just blanket that. If you want to do something highly technical, you should show that you can be highly technical. Now, if that is grad school, you want your GPA to be kind of high. If it's engineering, you don't necessarily have to have the GPA that is as high as grad school or med school bound people, but you have to be able to show that you know how to engineer, right? Like you have to make something, right? And so what's the point if what's important is conveying that you know how to make something if the course load that you pick just distracts you from actually doing that kind of thing? I don't know. I think it's tough, and I know that like I think there's a part that is I think students are anxious, and that really sucks. I was anxious as hell too, so like I totally get it, and it's unfair for me now that I'm gainfully employed to be like, oh, you know, you don't have to worry as much when I was like worried to all hell. But I think in terms of wording this as strategy, I don't know. I don't know what it would take to get students to calm down and not take, as Brina has taken, 18 credit hours. Like you don't need to do that, and I don't know how to convey that and have them believe me. Pretty interesting. So let's transition to talking about the utility of positive feedback, which I think is another interesting idea that I've been thinking about. We might not have time to get into everything. Utility of positive feedback. So I actually don't give a lot of positive feedback. I try not to. There's part of me that wants to, and that might surprise you. Because like positive feedback could mean the world to a student with insecurity about their work, right? And what I've been mulling around on my side is, should I start complimenting student writing? It might not even be possible because my workload is so high that finding things to compliment actually takes up quite a bit of time, and the turnaround for these homeworks is really, really short. So I'm playing around with the idea, but ultimately it might not even be possible. But I'm wondering from the chat how useful and how important positive feedback was actually for you when you were an undergraduate. If it really like was make or break for you, because in this environment positive feedback can be misinterpreted, which is really like crazy to me. So the logic here behind withholding positive feedback, or maybe not emphasizing positive feedback, is once you compliment a student doing one thing, if they uncritically apply the same logic to other aspects of their writing, then they get mad that you were inconsistent in grading, which is not ideal, because again, it just adds to the workload of like, I'm gonna have to litigate every point with these hyper competitive students, which is not what I want to be doing. But I like have an like I mean, it's really tough again because the feedback that I got on my writing like wrecked my ego, but like I got over it. My ideal situation would be that the students have the same experience, that it's okay to get criticism. It's okay to not have your feelings be buttressed by positive feedback. Because what is positive feedback? The positive feedback is in the grade, right? I feel like that has to be the case. That like, because I don't want students to litigate every point due to positive feedback, I feel like maybe I don't compliment them on specifics, but if they achieve a certain grade, maybe I just put a well done at the end. Maybe I'll do that. Be very vague about it so they don't come after me like a lawyer. I think it's essential. Like you need to know when to give it, and giving both positive and negative. I think Sai can give us much better insight into this topic. Don't know if she's in the chat. Yeah, I don't know if she's still in chat, but I think that would be interesting to look at from an academic perspective. But it's just so hard. It's so hard because I want to give positive feedback. Like I want to encourage the things that they are doing well. But in my experience, it has been used as a bludgeon to try to litigate every point, which has been miserable on my side. I really enjoyed getting drafts of paper back that had little to no notes on it at all. If there were markings on the page, it was something that needed to be fixed. That's kind of my feeling too, that like, you know, a good number of students in my class do get A's. And I just, from the feedback that I get sometimes, it feels like they're discouraged by all the things that need to be fixed in their writing. But like, not like they get a lot of comments, right? But if you look at the number that they get, it's still quite high. Like a lot of these are just like, some of them are fatal flaws. Some of them are like definitely things that you definitely need to fix. And others are like more minor, because we want them to be as competitive as possible. So yeah, maybe I can afford a good job. Maybe that's what I'll try. I'll see if that helps with the despondence next semester. When they talk to me about their ideas, I make sure to, if they come to my office hours and they talk to me, I will compliment them. I just don't do it in writing because it's like a document and then they litigate and it drives me crazy. Make sure you write stuff like, wow, Segoy, good job. I used to do that as a graduate student because I took that less seriously. My friends would give me stickers as gifts, and then I would use those stickers to like positively encourage the students that did good. Getting a smiley face on assignments always boosts my confidence. I used to do that, but again, I don't know. Maybe the litigation that has happened has like caused me to become a little more cynical. Maybe I should do something like that again. And yeah, okay, chat. For you, chat. For you, I'll write good jobs on students' works that do well. Yeah. Saturday is lurking way out of the area of expertise. Yeah. Oh, for those of you who don't know, Cideray, again, if you came after my announcement, we're forming a group called V-Theorem, VTubers that do science stuff. Very cool. Cideray studies psychology and metascience. And if you're into like conspiracy theory research, she's got a bunch of stuff that's fascinating on that topic. Very interesting stuff. We need to normalize sticker rewards again. I mean, we're talking about it, and like I'm beginning to think maybe that is more true than I want to admit, because I don't know, the relationship has like I don't want to be litigated, but maybe stickers are like a white flag of truce. Maybe that would be maybe that little gesture would be helpful for the overall mental. Scratch and sniff ones. Oh, okay. If my institution pays for it, then maybe. Pizza Hut coupons. We do offer free food occasionally. If my ego needed positive feedback on top of constructive feedback, I'd go to office hours. Yeah, because like I'm very happy. I compliment students all the time and be like, that's a very novel, engaging thought, mature line of thinking. Like I think carefully about non-generic compliments that I can give that are specific, but I don't do it on paper. Going off of the way you interpret comments, if you grade your papers in a similar manner to the way you analyze your comments, I would say you are already, in a way, give great feedback. Thank you. I think the feedback I give is pretty good, but when you have a number attached to it, I think I understand that it can be quite devastating. Hello, Art Shark. Welcome to the stream. We're talking about school stuff because I'm a teacher and I want to help the environment that my students are in. There's been a lot of like, school is hard and stressful, and I want to do my part to maybe think about ways you can mitigate that. Side super is true. Hello, welcome, more Jews. Hello, welcome. Hello, Sang. Hello, welcome. Yeah, we're talking about school stuff, and talking about whether or not it would be useful for students to get more positive feedback. Because my stance is, they can let it get to their head and then they get cocky, and then when you take off points, they feel like they don't deserve those points to be taken off. Which, again, I never had that attitude when I was in school. It's bonkers to me, but maybe if I'm vague enough and I just say good job when they do well, that might be good enough. Yeah. Compliment students. I barely heard one in my student life. Yeah. I mean, there can be good reasons why instructors don't typically do that. Stickers work for all ages, and I'm a competitive figure skater and now coach as well as my younger students love stickers. I even love getting stickers when I do a good job. Yeah. It's difficult because if you set the expectation that they're doing well and then you give them a grade that is not good, then you also get complaints. But maybe I should be more willing to experiment with the sticker thing. I actually find this really interesting because we actually have a standardized feedback system. X things done well, X points for improvement, X way to improve, so it's always 1/3 positive. Ooh, okay. That is interesting. That is... What happens when the entire assignment sucks, though? Sometimes I get homeworks that are truly terrible. Although that is an interesting thought. I don't want to dismiss it like out of pocket. I'm trying to challenge it into reality for my own class. Yeah, that's really interesting. I like this way better. Giving compliments face to face is better. It is, but you have to come to office hours and that kind of thing. Better than getting scolded all the time. That is quite demoralizing. I know. I feel for them. So chat, you've convinced me. If they get 90% on their homeworks or better, maybe I'll write a good job in there. We have to try really hard to find positive. Yeah, Sai, actually, speaking as a former graduate student myself, and you as a current graduate student, how often do you get positive feedback? Like in graduate school, I didn't get any positive feedback, but I didn't care because I was kind of in my own little universe. I didn't get negative feedback either. I kind of got no feedback, which was, I guess, concerning. The way you failed to meet the requirements of this assignment is impressive. Great job. Yeah, I mean, There's a funny thing where when we went under teacher training in graduate school, we learned about the compliment sandwich like technique, and it's so transparent, and you can see it every time in classrooms nowadays. But sometimes you really struggle with the compliment part of that compliment sandwich, depending on the quality of the work. Students will always complain it's legally obligated. It's true, but then the thing is that students who write bad reviews on your class can affect your own future, which is really tough, right? Like, you want to make it a good experience for everybody, but at the same time you don't want to compromise standards. And if there's this culture where everybody just wants things to be easy, that can be kind of difficult to manage, say. I should get loads. I'm very blessed to have a lovely advisor. I know other people who don't get any though. Yeah, it's rough. It can be rough. And I find that like undergraduates, like, you're supposed to become an adult in those formative years, but in many ways, because I think school delays the onset of having adult responsibilities, I still view them as like babies, because they're just doing school plus and they haven't had real life perspectives. So to call them actual adults is like, it's tough because I expect them to figure it out, but the university is not a great place to figure out how to be an adult either. Yeah, okay, so let's move on, because I am going to be ending stream in about 40 minutes. This is really fascinating conversation. I love talking about the meta of education, because not only do I love biology, as you can probably tell, when a student, so why I love teaching is not that like, oh, I'm empowering the next generation, which, I can feel good about doing. There's definitely that aspect to it. But in terms of like, when I get excited, it's because students have reached the point where they can appreciate the cool stuff that I'm teaching them. I'm kind of selfish in that way. So let's talk about utility of homework. So this class has a lot of homework, a lot of writing assignments, which is important from my perspective because you don't get better at writing until you write. And even as an English minor, I did very, very well in my English classes. I was very proud of the way that I could organize thoughts. But like I had mentioned earlier in stream, when I got back feedback from my first grant proposal, I was absolutely devastated. And I continued to be devastated every time I submitted drafts because it felt like I could do nothing right. But over time, critically analyzing my own writing and looking back to how my writing used to be, there's a sense of self-efficacy where I do feel like I've gotten much better at writing. And then it stopped feeling so bad because I was actually like for real improving. And there's this perspective, so a bunch of like really elite universities during my grad school held a kind of conference about innovating teaching methods, and I had attended as a graduate student. So a lot of like very passionate educators at very like high institutions that are very, very, very invested in their students, who are facing the same sort of cynicism and panic and anxiety. And I'm not saying that that's not true of all universities. I'm just pointing out that like these kinds of problems are evident even at like these high levels as in like, well, yeah, whatever. And there was a good conversation about analyzing the utility of homework and whether or not assigning homework actually provides benefit. Homework / test conversation that we had earlier. I think homework, testing. I think that homework can be a great utility, and especially in the class that we teach, it builds into the major assignments. So homework is actually weighted very low. It's pennies compared to the dollar of the actual grade. And it's a lot of homework, but it's there so that students can practice in a low stress environment. But students don't seem to appreciate that aspect because we get complaints all the time about how there's too much homework. Well, it's like, yes, the homework is not easy, but it's also not worth that much of your grade because we want to use homework as a way to actually teach how to write and how to think. And we don't want to punish you for not getting it wrong, for not getting it right the first time. That being said, we can't make homework 0% of the grade, right? Then nobody would do it. Like, that's why it's frustrating, right? Because you're dealing with people who are supposed to be adults who can supposedly self-regulate, but you still need to incentivize them to do things. So you still have to treat them with this like carrot and stick, right? The carrot is your grade, but it's a 10% carrot, right? It's not like it's not a Minecraft, gold carrot or whatever, right? Like it's just your stock carrot. Like just do it for practice, and by practicing you'll actually get a lot more points on the major assignments. So I don't think homework is useless. I just think it has to be correctly implemented. But I know that a lot of my colleagues have been thinking about abolishing homework because it puts like an undue stress on students. But I think that just theoretically, I don't know that for a fact because I haven't read the literature, but I feel like that's just not like that true. Maybe there's bad homework out there, as comments are now pointing out, but I think that is a very novel way to do homework, and I think more classes maybe should start thinking about that philosophy. Make homework worth not a lot, make everything else worth a lot more, disincentivize stressing over homework. At least that's how it would work in theory, but students get stressed about homework anyway, which is why I'm struggling with whether or not this is something that needs to be changed or should be changed. Megacraft, you would make it entirely optional. That's interesting. If you don't do it, you'll probably not pass, but you can certainly avoid it when overwhelmed. Yeah, like I agree with that in theory, because in theory these should be adults who can self-regulate, in theory. But there's this weird incentive where if they do poorly because homework, they don't do the homework and then they do poorly and then they complain and then the grades drop and then that makes us look bad. There's like this weird incentive structure that makes that a difficult thing to implement, right? Because students will be like, well, I didn't do well. And then you can respond with, well, you didn't do any of the homework, so how could you expect to do well? And then they can just say that your class is too hard. And that sucks, right? Although, I don't know, maybe like a forgiveness coupon that you can do to opt out of 1 or 2 homeworks. But even that, I don't really love the idea of, because our late policy is also like really generous. Homework shouldn't be easy or it feels like a waste of time. I think there should be less of it, but more challenging. It's an interesting perspective. I know that I would not have liked that answer considering what I remember about my math classes. I felt like I didn't want them to be harder because I didn't actually want to be there studying math. Maybe that's a legitimate strategy for classes that are not gen eds. That like as a biologist, I still had to take calculus. Maybe that doesn't work in a calculus class, but maybe it works for higher level classes. That's an interesting idea. Doing book problems out of a textbook is exhausting. Sometimes feel not worth it to do. I love homework that challenges me and pushes me to think about outside the box. I think that is interesting because the perspective that I've seen is that people would prefer to have homework be more mind-numbing. But maybe my audience self-selects for people who like to do that critical thinking. Not mind-numbing, that's unfair, but like, if you have to think hard to do homework, I feel like that's less of a popular idea, and I think we might be over-selecting for people who are more tolerative of that aspect of homework. Especially because we have a non-zero number of pre-meds who would flip out if their homework was any harder. Students always have the option to say that your class is too hard regardless of homework. I mean, that's true. I mean, I get that, but we want to minimize the chance that that happens, Testing is another I think quiz or test work better for me so I can pace myself. Homework feels so tedious. Teachers tend not to care about all and place a lot of them homework at the same time. Yeah, I think intelligent implementation of homework, like directed implementation of homework, is useful. But what that means for every class can look quite different and can be inconsistent, which might mess with students' perspectives of what counts as useful. How long do I expect people to spend on an average homework assignment? it kind of depends. There are some homework assignments which can be done in like 10 minutes, which are very quick and very short. There are other assignments which can take quite a bit longer. I don't remember exactly the number, but uh, there are some where I would expect it to be like an hour or 2 hours. Those are like, that's like the absolute highest that I would expect out of a single homework. And the turnaround on some of these homeworks is like the whole weekend plus 2 days. Sometimes it's 2 days. So it depends a lot on the actual assignment. My favorite higher level classes were structured with 4 or 5 homework assignments for the semester. We would get it like a week to work on and ask questions about. I think that works only for higher level classes because again, the students will have learned how to self-regulate and not procrastinate. And at the level that I teach at, that's not necessarily always true. And higher level classes really force you to engage at that high level. Whereas I'm, again, like your art teacher, I still teach you perspective and art color theory. It's a lot to learn in one semester. So I feel like bigger assignments doesn't quite work for our particular application, but it is an interesting thought to have for the upper level classes. I enjoyed doing homeworks in groups, but alone it was kind of soul crushing. That's the kind of thing that, like, again, with this critical self-efficacy or critical self-assessment, like if you find that you do better in groups, do it. I find that there are students who take too long to reach out for help in when they're struggling. For me, in my class that I got a C on, I just accepted it. Could I have gotten help? Yeah, but I made the calculation that getting help would waste more time that I could be spending doing better in other classes, and that I would just eat the C in Orgo. I think that's okay. I was just like, I guess I'm not fit to be an organic chemist. That's okay with me. That's not unreasonable in terms of homework time commitment. I agree, but I don't actually know how long they spend on it practically. I don't have that data. I'm 100% opposite to that. I hated doing group work in uni schooling in general. Yeah, it really depends on your mechanisms of accountability. So I've had students who have learned that they need a group to be accountable. And, whatever you need to do, whatever you need to do. Unfortunately in science, or fortunately in science, so much of it is collaborative, so you'll never get away from working in groups. Yeah, so the utility of testing I find is also very interesting. So testing as a metric, this was most of the conversation that we had at that conference, whether or not testing should even be a thing, if there are better ways to assess student outcome. And I think this is a very hairy topic, and we didn't come up with any good solutions because, I mean, the definition of a test is an evaluation of the cumulative knowledge that you have acquired. For our class, where we're teaching writing and thinking, you can't really, like, a test doesn't make sense for our particular class. But if you're doing biology 101, if you have to learn everything about the cell at a 101 level, I don't know how you get away with not doing a test, right? Like, because at a 101 level, you don't have enough knowledge to think critically yet. You can in a limited capacity, but in the structure of existing classes, I find it difficult to assess whether or not a student knows everything that they need to know, or enough of what they need to know about a cell besides a test. And you could argue that, there are people who have test anxiety. And I sympathize greatly with that. For those people, there are accommodations that can be made if you qualify for an exception, where you get extra time, for example. I think that's an okay approach. But I do sympathize with this idea that testing is not the end-all be-all. I just don't know of a better way to do it. Because that's the kind of thing that students can complain about all the time. Very legitimately, by the way. I don't mean to disparage anybody who has test anxiety and does not do well on tests. Like, I do very well on tests because I view it like a game. Like, I've always had this like grinding aspect to tests, where I've been able to game my own brain to do well on them. But I know that that's not true for a lot of other people who are as capable, if not more capable than I am in our respective fields. But to move past testing as a metric for understanding, I find to be very difficult, because if you do something like homework and make it more on homework, well, then you are less aware of how much of that information is coming from just like Googling stuff instead of like a deeper knowledge. I'm curious as to what chat thinks. All of my chemistry homework has been book problems, because what professor wants to make their own chemistry homework? The grade was based off of completion, which motivated me to get through it. I don't know if I would be comfortable with that. I'd have to think about that. I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that in biology, or anything where you can reliably get an answer key. Yeah, I don't know, because that kind of goes hand in hand with the effort grading, which I don't know how comfortable I feel with that kind of thing. Hated group projects, especially if the groups are too big for us to spread the work equally. Yeah, I think the best group size is like 3 people, 3 or 4. And I know I've had group projects that have spanned way larger than that, and it's just been, it's hard enough to get VTubers to get on the same date to collab, let alone like a group project. Working in groups, time management, seeking help, these are all skills necessary when you're out of school working professionally. Exactly. And that critical self-assessment, there's not a class that you take on it in school. You're just expected to learn that yourself. And, you know, I did, but for some reason, it's not clicking with everybody. And I'm wondering, what can we do about that to encourage that level of extracurricular development that doesn't have to do with the specifics of science? Just like how to be an efficient learner. I don't know if there's a way to do that. Yeah, working on homeworks. Yeah, I used to do that for genetics class. I worked with a friend because genetics was so tough. Genetics is interesting, don't get me wrong, but I think genetics requires you to have a much more mathematically inclined brain than I do. I like thinking about cells and molecules, but genetics, a lot of that required you to think about math. And to keep me accountable, to make sure I stayed on top of the homework, I used to work with a friend on that. Bye, MegaCraft. Thanks for tuning in. It's an interesting conversation. I hate testing it. I've never been good at it, but tests feel essential. It's important to make sure that you're understanding what you're being taught. Yeah, it's important that you're able to retrieve the information from your own brain when you need it. And why is that? So this is often a complaint that I hear about the system of medicine, where like, oh, why do doctors need to know glycolysis, for example, where like they're never actually going to use glycolysis in their day-to-day practice, or like the MCAT in general. Sorry, so this is kind of unrelated actually to this problem, but like to talk about medicine for a sec, I think what I didn't understand about medicine when I was pre-med was the MCAT does not measure your capacity to be an effective doctor, in the sense that like, do you need organic chemistry or physics? I mean, maybe a little bit in med school and in your practice, but what the MCAT actually is a hard check on your ability to learn new information. And if I had known that, I would have been a lot more cynical, I think. But like protectively cynical, right? Because I thought that, oh, I'm gonna need organic chemistry in medical school, whereas what I should have been challenging myself to do was to perform as high as possible in terms of treating it more like a game I can min-max than like learning the information in a deep way. But if you're actually trying to do work in the field, like, you don't know what you don't know until you've been critically evaluated, right? Like, yeah, after you finish the class, you can Google anything you need to Google. That's definitely true. You don't have to memorize everything, but you need to be aware of everything, right? Like, right now, if you ask, like, there are comments that I sometimes get in my live chat where it's just people asking me things about biology, and I'm like, I've stopped responding to those, because let's be honest, biology is a huge field. There's no way that even I, who teaches biology, can have every aspect of biology memorized. I'll often have to relook stuff up all the time, because biology is such a vast field. But in order to do my job as an instructor well, I have to be aware of a lot of biology. And you can only know whether or not a student has picked up that awareness if you test them. I don't know if this idea of moving past testing could work better in fields that aren't science. Like maybe that has more potential, but until we come up with a better way to evaluate students based on their understanding of the material without tests, I think we're stuck in this land. I think what would help the overall issue would be a specific guide as to what the professor is going to be asking. It doesn't have to be a full study guide, but something so that students aren't surprised. Yeah, that idea of like straightforward expectation, I think really helps pre-med students the most. And it's the aspect of classes that I, as a student, appreciated the most. This, I think you'll have a hard time selling to a lot of instructors in terms of being able to critically understand things. It's an interesting idea, and it's the way that some of my classes used to work. And to me, it did take a lot of the stress off to be able to do that kind of thing. I'd be interested to know, and it's something for me to look up in the education literature, is having clear expectations for test topics correlated with better performance after graduation. Because yeah, obviously, if you make the expectations very clear on what you're going to be tested on, of course you're going to get a better grade. That's just true. Whether or not it also results in you having learned the material better, I don't know if that's true. So that's actually something for me to look up for in the future. It's pretty interesting. I think those are important to know more about the mechanism of how illnesses work. Not knowing things can make it really hard to see other consequences of something or remember it effectively. Yeah, like you have to have learned biology. You don't have to have everything memorized. Like you have to be aware that there are things happening. And those, I think, come into play when you are in the field a lot more. Like if you wanted, so it's the biohacking thing, right? A lot of my audience actually watches the Thought Emporium. So I actually have been going back and forth as to whether or not I should do it as a video, because I don't want it to blow up, because I don't want to start beef. But if I were to take the Bio Emporium example of someone biologically engineering a virus that cures lactose intolerance, if a student were to propose that project, I would mark them off for not considering the potential consequences for their biology as a whole. It would indicate to me that they understood a tool, but maybe didn't understand the whole system surrounding that tool, which is a bummer. And more juices in chat. I'm gonna come out and say it. Like, I've been toying with the idea of doing the biohacking thing as an actual stream again. Like I know I've been ping-ponging on around it, but like I actively don't want to invite controversy on my channel. I don't want to have that be a part of my main line of videos at all. With fewer people tuning into my streams, it's actually beneficial because only the people that like care enough about me to tune in will watch. And then that way I can mitigate any potential backlash I might get for that video. I wonder how much of the education system is also built on the idea that instructors and professors don't want to do homework either. This is why they need to hire more full-time instructors like me, right? There are professors, you know, I've had professors like that are teaching because parents want their children to be learning from the best professors, but they don't actually want to teach, and so they just kind of make their class, you know, very whatever. My favorite biodrama VTuber. No, I can't tell you how much that idea has stressed me out. The idea of being like, I've gone through not like the stages of depression with the idea, but like, you know, I started when I first learned about it, I started with rage, and then I went into depression because I was so sad that the video was so successful, and then I was back to rage because it was successful, and then like after calming down, I had this like phase of acceptance where like Thought Emporium guy, I mean, I think he's a very capable biological engineer in terms of getting to do cool things, stuff that I probably couldn't think of or pull off myself, but at the same time, he should not be making medicine. And I think forcing myself to compliment him has calmed the fires of my soul. Yeah. Yeah, best in X field doesn't always mean the best teachers. Yeah, exactly. Like, just because you are the best researcher doesn't mean you're the best manager, doesn't mean you're the best teacher. We should be hiring people who are good at those things. The things that the Thought Emporium does are really sick, help you understand a lot of concepts. Yeah, I mean, I don't watch the content because my first exposure to his content was the AAV lactose intolerance biohacking video, and I just couldn't. I'm sure he's great. Like, I'm sure the stuff he does is very cool. I think he grew meat using Gatorade as media. Like, that sounds cool. I don't know. I'm now more cynical in terms of believing if they're actually done legitimately, which is really tough for me to say, but giving him the benefit of a doubt, you know, I'm sure he's great, probably, but the AAV lactose intolerance thing is a disgrace. That's really harsh of me to say, but I have very strong opinions on that. And I was surprised, like in my YouTube analytics, the top channel that I have overlap with is the Thought Emporium. So I'm like, I don't want to like do that, man. I don't know. Yeah, you've tainted me. Like, I don't know. I've seen his thumbnails around before I started this channel. They looked cool. But yeah. Take everything with a grain of salt. I've had people fact check me on my channel. Like, nobody is an expert that is infallible. Consume a wide variety of sources, and if you do that, it is less likely that you will believe in misinformation. Just put it that way. Okay, so I've had a lot of fun chatting. I had one more topic, which is just general, I think, unhappiness in academia, but we kind of addressed all of that during the comments. You know, the structure of the comments that we've seen. So what I'll do now is I will go back to the announcement that I made at the beginning of stream, just in case you tuned in before started. So I realized I don't have an art hashtag. So I think what we settled on is microbial masterpieces. So if you want to contribute some art to me on Twitter, you know, that would be pretty cool. And then in terms of this thing that I've been teasing for the past couple of weeks, this is a group of STEM VTubers called VTheorem that we've been cooking up ever since like December. And it's consisting of me, Philo Neutrophil, Cideray, and Nepenthes VT. You can find them. There are links in the channel description. What we're going to do is we're going to be doing, we're not an agency, but we're like an informal group. And the idea of this project is to like imagine a future where education becomes a regular feature of VTubing as a genre, right? Because we know how popular gaming is, and within the category of variety can be education. And I think it would be cool if groups started popping up where you can easily find educational content from other VTubers. I think that'd be neat. I believe that both Sai and Nep will be streaming. I believe they will be streaming later today. I think I don't know if Sai is still lurking, but I think Sai will be streaming at 1 p.m. EST. So you can go check her out there. I think Nep is also streaming, but I don't know when that's actually happening. Yeah, and you can check out what they do back there. We are debuting, sorry, one more thing. We are debuting on 5/19. That's why I've been teasing that particular date. And what we are doing in that debut is a lore drop for our shared lore, but we also want some audience participation. If you have Q&As for us as like talents, or you know, questions to ask about our disciplines, or questions about VTheorem as a whole, please submit your questions in the link pinned in the chat. And if you have some science trivia, we'll also be playing trivia so that we can embarrass each other as to how little we know about other people's fields. We're going to do a round where it's biology, a round where it's cell and molecular biology, one where it's plants, and one where it's psychology. But we also want to do like a audience round. So if you have trivia you would like to submit, it doesn't have to be in our fields. It can be like physics, chemistry, whatever you study. Submit some questions. We'll probably have a round just from you guys. Okay, with that, I have been yapping quite a bit. I hope to see you all at our debut, and maybe later today at Side Stream. Who knows? Maybe I'll show up. I don't know. We'll just see. What about weeb trivia? If you can hack it to be academic related, maybe. You're very bad at trivia, so will be an experience. I might not be much better, but I wanted to be a psychologist when I was in high school, so I might have an edge on you there. But we'll see. I like to talk a lot of shit before. Again, the whole like I got a big ego. So it'd be kind of fun to see if to test that ego come Sunday. Alrighty. Okay. All right. See you all later. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, y'all.